welcome everyone. It's really nice to have such a great turnout. Today's a national alignment meeting, so we're here to talk about so many changes that are happening within our industry and more broadly, not just in the cosmetic sector or the non-surgical cosmetic sector, but really throughout all of our sectors, and how this affects everyone, not just cosmetic nurses, not just doctors, but it really affects dermal therapists, beauty therapists, and everybody who's kind of participating in our industry. So again, loads happening in our industry. I feel like we're having a complete reform. It did start a little while ago, a few years back in the cosmetic surgery sector, but now it's flowed over into the non-surgical sector. As we can see, it's actually heading into dermal and beauty as well. So we thought it was really important to align, get everyone together and really hear from experts in the industries, but also there's the associations, the other associations in the industry, to see how we can collaborate. Because what we've noticed is there's been so many inquiries that ABIC has been flooded with questions about what's happening with regards to all of the guideline changes, what's happening with, nurse prescribing, what's happening on state-based level. So we got kind of all these questions together and thought, look, we'll do a meeting. One thing I did notice is that there is a split focus. So there's a lot of different ideas and different focuses happening in our industry, and it's very, very hard to answer all of your questions in one meeting. I think we need to split it up. I'll do my absolute best because everybody really wants me to focus on their particular concern, but the truth is that everything, all areas of reform that are happening right now, they all intersect. So it's important to touch on each of them and then find out the specific pathway to get the information that you need, that you're confused about. Where do you go to get that? And we've got some leaders tonight speaking about how they will be able to help you and support you in your sector. Obviously, ABIC can give you that support, AHPRA can give you that support, but it's important to understand what support you need and then direct you to the right place. Because really, everything that's happening in our industry informs the next. TGA informs AHPRA and really wins over on AHPRA when it comes to advertising laws. And all of those state laws are affected by what AHPRA, I suppose, and TGA say, because when they do legislative reforms, they take that into consideration as well. So I've got some more waiting. So the crux of it is right now, I can move to the next slide and make my PowerPoint work. You'll have to bear with me. I'm on a foreign computer today. So tonight, the purpose of tonight is basically let's go over the guidelines and have a look at where your questions are and where you're struggling. Okay, so that's the non-surgical practice guidelines and the high-risk procedure guidelines. Where are you struggling? Let's help to clarify things and also send you in the right direction to find answers. And to also touch on nurse prescribing, because we all are a little bit confused about that. It's supposed to come out in September. What does it mean? And where do we go for that information? A little bit on how the state legislation and the roadblocks there as well. We're going to answer your questions. We've got some practical, a little bit of practical solutions as well and examples. So that will be really cool. And then what's next? What can we do to support each other and the industry as well? A little bit about ABIC. So ABIC is the Aesthetic and Beauty Industry Council. People think it stands for the Australian Beauty Industry Council. It's not. It's aesthetic and beauty together. It's medical aesthetic, dermal, and beauty. And it's because we're a little bit different, because our specialization isn't so much the professional enhancement CPD type area of standards. The focused associations do really well at looking after that. We look after, in the broader sense, business. So we look after HR, human resources, IR, all the laws, tax reform, wage reform, legislations that affect small businesses and employees. So we're constantly all the time talking to government about what's going on in the small business world. And that means we give advice, we give advocacy, we offer HR services to our businesses, and we help employees, we help students as well navigate the changes. We give information on budgets and tax reforms and things like that. Most recently, we've been asked to talk to the ACCC on the no fee FPOS laws. So we do a whole bunch of things, including long service portable leave. But we also talk about the AHPRA guidelines, talk to AHPRA, we talk to New South Wales EPA on laser reform. We talk about education reform and occupation reform. So we are holistic in that way, but we don't replace the industry sector organizations. We work alongside them so that we have a bigger, more united voice as well, and we can get everybody together to talk about these things holistically. So we absolutely respect and cherish the relationship we have with the other associations, and we think they're doing incredible work in their sector, and to that as well, we want to share in this unity and collaboration. Nikki, if you're here yet, hopefully you are, and you can say hello. Just going to admit more people because they've come in. Bear with me. The mouse isn't working for some reason. There it is. All right, I'm going to mute everyone. Okay, so with that, I'm going to introduce our first speaker because it's important to start the night off hearing from the other associations, but also hearing what we can do in terms of collaboration and what we can do to overcome the challenges. And we'd really like to hear what the challenges are from different perspectives. So Sherry Lee Knoop, thank you so much for joining us, and just have some few questions for you, which we talked about just before ahead of this meeting anyway. So, what are the challenges you're seeing and facing? What's the concern and uncertainty, and what are you doing as well in CNA to support your members? Because I know you're doing so much in the AHPRA space as well. So I'll hand over to you. You're on mute as well.
Oh, there you go. Can you hear me now? Yes. Oh, good. That's better. Thank you so much for the invitation, Steph. I really appreciate you including the CNA in this collaboration and in this conversation. And I think that together, as you were just saying before, together we are much stronger. But I think it's also important that we look at this industry from several different viewpoints, because you can become very one-eyed. We're very focused clinically and how, as clinicians, our scope of practice is playing out in terms of the people who are regulating us, and in terms of how the industry as a whole views us, but then also on the other side, how patients are viewing us and how the general public are viewing us as an industry. Most of us would like to move towards a situation where we are recognized as a specialty, and that's very convoluted in this space because we're not very clearly medical, and we're not very clearly business, and we're not very clearly beauty either. So it's a bit of a compilation or a collaboration anyway in how we practice. So it makes sense that we have all of these viewpoints across the industry so that we understand where we're all coming from. So I appreciate that opportunity to be here myself, but also the opportunity to speak. In terms of what the challenges are, I think they're many and varied, and they also can be very specific. So I think in broad brushstrokes, it's about us understanding the guidelines as a starting point and being able to interpret them in one particular way. Now, what's happening is basically there's so much grey in the area, 50 shades of grey, if you like. And depending on who you speak to and what their viewpoint is, or how they actually practice and where they practice, will depend on how it affects them, and therefore how these guidelines are interpreted for them. And that's it. So that's at a national level. And then we move on to the challenges around the grey area around each state and territory, because actually every health department, and we've spoken to most of them, has a different viewpoint on what that actually means, what the AHPRA guidelines are interpreted as, what the Medicines and Poisons Act are interpreted as, and how the two play together. And even the differences between the previous AHPRA guidelines in terms of advertising and what the TGA was saying, and now the new guidelines are more in line with what the TGA was saying, I do know that AHPRA pushed back on the TGA guidelines in terms of advertising a bit, in terms of the understanding and the transparency and the clarity that they were requiring in their previous guidelines. So I think that even within the agencies, there's grey in terms of interpretation. And for any of you that have had any conversations with any of the authorities, you'll find that you speak to one person and you get one point of view, and you speak to somebody else and you get a slightly different point of view. And so it's very difficult to actually, so I think that's the greatest challenge that we all face, is actually understanding and knowing where to get the information from. At the end of the day, we all have to get our information for ourselves, and we can't be listening to anybody. We should collaborate with our associations. We should collaborate with other associations. We should go to conferences and listen. We should attend webinars and all of that. But you have to read the guidelines. You have to go and read those guidelines and understand them to your best ability for yourself. Because at the end of the day, when you are questioned on how you are operating, you need to have good process thinking around how you've interpreted those guidelines. But the interpretation, I think, is the biggest challenge that we all face at the moment. And that's probably the most universal. And then when we deep dive into, okay, how does this affect nurses versus doctors versus beauty therapists, it's slightly different because we operate slightly differently. If you're working in a doctor-led clinic where you work as a collaborative team of doctors, nurses, dermal clinicians, then and you're in Queensland, for example, then things are not so different for you and things are not such a big upheaval. But if you're working in a clinic by yourself as a nurse with a telehealth support system and you might be remote, then this has huge impact on how you're operating and huge impact on your business, and potentially it could be facing the loss of your business. And we're talking to nurses all the time who are in that position, and obviously we feel for them and trying to find ways around this and other opportunities, which we'll get into, I know, later on. But that's really, I guess that's what I see as the biggest challenge, but also the biggest confusion and the uncertainty, if you like, which is your two first questions. I think it's very easy in this space to be what they call other referent. So and so says this is the interpretation, and therefore this is how it's going to be. But then I spoke to so and they said this and this and this, and I think we're all just trying really hard to understand it for ourselves. I think one of the important things as nurses and healthcare professionals is we've got to go back to the basis of what does a medical model look like? What is a health professional's responsibility around medications and around administering medications or prescribing if you're an MP, as a nurse, or even the doctors? And how would you do this if it was an antibiotic or if it was a medication in a hospital, etc.? And that starts the basis of our scope of practice, which is governed by ourselves. So as long as you are justifying your scope and you are responsible to your scope of practice, if you can show that you are well educated in something and you understand it fully and you're providing a safe service, nobody else can tell you what your scope of practice is. For any of you that were on the CNA webinar with AHPRA last week, you would have heard Professor Casey, Veronica Casey, who is chair of the board of the nurses board. She said that AHPRA and the nurses board do not govern scope. They are there to understand what your scope is and to measure it against what you are informing. But all of our scope starts from a baseline and it then progresses depending on what your education has been and what your pathway has been. So you may have worked across many areas of nursing. You may be brand new out of university and you've gone straight into aesthetics, and you may only be 2 years in, but you still have got a scope. You've actually had a pathway. You've been educated in a way that is supporting what you're actually doing, hopefully, and therefore that is your scope. So I think those things, there's no uncertainty about that. I think that's become very clear, whereas I think that was a little bit grey before. But I think they're being very distinctive in terms of that. And in Section 9 of the new guidelines, it's been far more detailed about what education may look like for those working in in cosmetic medicine. And I think that's important. I think that's also been a very grey area and an uncertainty. We speak to nurses all the time that are looking at the education possibilities, the education pathway towards cosmetic medical practice, and it's not been very clear, and it's becoming more clear. And we all understand now that there's a level of education that we need to achieve, and there's a CPD requirement that we need to be upholding in terms of our nursing, but also in terms of specifically towards our cosmetic medicine. Do you want me to go on to the other questions just automatically?
Yeah, we did start a little bit late, so I'll give a little bit more time to yourself and to ASDC, and then introduce Nikki as well. So yeah, just
Okay.
if you could just tell us a little bit about how you're supporting the members.
What we're doing. Well, when I took on the role as president, I had no idea what this would look like, if I'm very honest. When we started the CNA, it was about having a voice at government. We were in the middle of COVID, and several of us put together the CNA. I wasn't the president at the time. Lovely Jacinta King was the president, and we had a different board. But those ladies worked very hard in those early years to achieve the standing that we have now in terms of being recognised as the voice for nurses. We have the biggest nurse membership of cosmetic nurses specifically, and we specifically advocate for cosmetic nurses in this space with government and any other body collaborations, just like our collaboration with yourself, Steph, at ABIC. And those are very important in order for us to be able to support our members. But it's become a very big governance role, which is not my thing, actually. I prefer education and clinical space, but it's become a big government role because of all of the, since 2021, when the first lot of guidelines came through for the cosmetic surgeons, by 2022, we had a whole different state of play in terms of the industry. And it's been, I think, 6 submissions since then that we have put into AHPRA and 2 to the TGA in terms of pushing back on guidelines. And we've had a lot of wins. We've had some losses. Well, in my world, they're losses because it doesn't seem fair, some of the advertising guidelines that the TGA put in place, and we'll discuss that later. But we've made a lot of headway. It's very good that they now see us as a stakeholder in the industry, and we actually have a seat at the table. They actually are asking our opinion on things, and that means that we are sharing the opinion of our members. Our other remits are to provide clinical information, to give back to our members in terms of education and support and complications management and treatment protocols and various other things that we've done over the years. But in terms of navigating the changes now, we're constantly having conversations with AHPRA and trying to get as much clarity as possible. Those of you that were on the webinar last week would know that I pushed them pretty hard on some of the things that were quite grey and got some better determinations.
As we're talking as well, if we come up with an area of contention, I encourage Nikki, Shirley, and also the Jen and Vera to help along and interject as well. I will also now introduce Nikki Zemas. She is an ABIC counsellor. So Nikki is the director and lead educator at CPD Institute, and most of you who are cosmetic nurses and even I think dermal clinicians will know of the CPD Institute. They provide training for non-surgical cosmetic, but also within the dermal space as well. And Nikki is a counsellor and looks after, a lot of what we're going to be talking about tonight. So even though I will be taking lead on presenting, Nikki will share her understanding as well along the way. So thank you for joining us, Nikki. And then who's up next is Vera from the Australian Society of Dermal Clinicians. And I think, Jen, I'm so sorry I'd done that presentation before I knew you were coming along as well. So thank you so much, Jen Byrne, who is the past president as well, Australian Society of Dermal Clinicians. Vera, are you around?
Hi everyone. Excuse my voice. I've just recovered from laryngitis. So if I run away, it's because I'm going to be having a coughing fit. So to start off with, I'd like to thank Steph for putting this together and all the hard work she puts in to be able to, I suppose, to be all on the same page and to be able to provide the industry, the different sectors, our where we're coming from, as well as so that we understand where others are coming from, and we work. At the end of the day, it's a way for us to all work collaboratively. So the bigger the voice, the bigger the voice, the stronger the voice, the more we will be heard. I guess that is the main aim. And thank you, Cherie Lee, for taking us through what the cosmetic nurses are doing. So for the dermal clinicians, it's slightly different. So the most common question that is asked by our members is, does the AHPRA guidelines apply to us? To them in practice, if we are not regulated by AHPRA. So we currently, we're unregistered health professionals, so we kind of don't sit under AHPRA's guidelines. And however, as dermal clinicians, because we are in the others allied health, we do advocate in practicing and following the guidelines. If you are, depending on what you're doing in your practice and what type of practice you're in. So for those that are working in more medical-led clinics, they would fall under and they would follow a lot of the medical-led regulations, legislations that the clinic would have, and they would practice within their scope. So I'm really glad Cherie Lee brought up scope of practice. So scope of practice is one of those things that for the non-medical aesthetic industry, and coming from beauty therapy myself and going into dermal, I think one of the things that a lot of beauty therapists, dermal clinicians are now recognizing better what our scope is and the confines of our scope, what we can and shouldn't do, can't do. And, when you are pressured to do things that's not within your scope, how do you tackle that in the workplace? So for the others, I think so here I need to disclaim, I personally, because I have been in the industry for a long time, in industry, I do quite often come across dermal therapists, beauty therapists who may seek personal advice when they're working in places where they're not 100% sure whether it is within their scope. Should they be doing it, and how should they be doing it? So I try and guide them back to their industry representative. And a lot of the time, I know Steph and ABIC is doing so much work. I know it's business. It is for the business in the HR in all those areas, but I know Steph has lots of resources that she can, or her team can, direct people to the right places as well. So I think moving forward and in this industry, I think we need definitely clearer scope of practice and individuals sticking to their scope of practice. Yeah, scope of practice is one of those things. You have your main qualification, and then we do professional development. So in areas of cosmetic nursing, you would probably have CPD set up where, if you've maintained, or if you have attended certain courses, it's worth more. So your scope changes and you can add to your scope. However, in the beauty and to a certain degree in the dermal state, we are not set up with that um, um, uh, with that very solidly, I suppose, set up so that it's identified and clearly identified, you know, what is professional development and how do we measure the professional development. So I think as an industry, working together, that's probably an area that we need to work more towards as well. So going back to our the talk and the questions of today. So because dermal clinicians are straddled between therapeutic health settings and of course cosmetic settings using, you know, non-surgical skin therapies in many applications and clinical settings. So, you know, to reiterate, because we're not registered under AHPRA, a lot of those things um, don't legally apply to us, if I can say that. However, so legally, because we're not registered as health professionals within AHPRA. However, for best practice and what we advocate as a society to all of our members and non-members who are dermal clinicians, dermal therapists, we do advocate that you do understand the guidelines, so TGA regulations and code of conduct in non-registered health professionals and practice within those guidelines, because at the end of the day, it is best practice. So with that in mind, a lot of these things have come through because of advertising and how can you advertise and can you advertise certain things? Should you advertise certain things along these lines? So it all comes back to, and I think it is, again, you know, reiterating unity has a bigger voice. So I think we need our members, we need our industry to understand that if you are making claims, number one, is it within your scope of practice, the claim that you're making or advertising, and can you use those terms? So as long as you understand those things, I think it is hard at times because certain words can be misunderstood and misinterpreted. And you know, think when you're putting things together or when you're speaking to consumers, what is within your scope and what you can say diagnose and not diagnose. You might have a wealth of knowledge because you've been practicing within the industry. Because I know beauty therapists who know the skin inside out. Come on, you know, they've been working in the industry for a long time. They understand the skin really, really well. However, are they qualified to be able to diagnose conditions? So that's where you kind of get a bit stuck. So it's learning how to use words to talk to to consumers, because consumers are drawn into the advertising and the hype of the advertising. And I suppose as a therapist, clinician, you know, at times you are drawn into that as well. So you want to be a lead in that area because you want to attract customers. So in doing that, is that going to be beneficial, and are you impeding on regulations that you shouldn't be making claims? So at the end of the day, isn't that's kind of the crux of the whole thing, isn't it? So I think working together, we need to have more seminars, education in around how to use words and what can you use. And this is not just as, you know, practicing therapists or clinicians or even nurses, I think, because we are we are bombarded by uh, cosmeceutical companies, so product companies. We are bombarded from device companies, which will make claims on things or which will advertise on certain things. And sometimes we need to look at how they're advertising, who they're advertising to. So they could be talking to us thinking that we are professional, so we have a certain understanding. So the wording that is used is, of course, very different to wording that should be used if it's consumer facing. So there's kind of like a bit of a grey multiple tier of what needs to be done and what should be done. So, at the end of the day, ASDC members are also guided by our code of ethics, ethical practice and standard of practice for dermal therapists and dermal clinicians. We have guidance and examples. If you're a member on our portal, there's lots of resources available to members, and we do, we don't just stop at helping our members. We have non-members when they need extra help. If we can, we still help them as well. So the greatest area of confusion, which I've kind of covered, is the cosmetic and therapeutic claims. What are you claiming that you can do? So be careful in utilizing words that may describe what you can do, but within the confinements of advertising of ARTG listed devices, utilizing ARTG listed devices. So if those devices have been approved for certain conditions, then you can, I suppose, refer to the fact that those machines are. So as an organisation, how are we supporting our members? And we have, a really big resource centre. We're constantly updating our resource centre. So with new things come into play, and we seek our legal representatives so that what we're providing our members is of wording that is used, that is legally, I suppose, approved, if I can use that word. And, we have webinars hosted coming up by the ASDC and facilitated by TGA to educate representatives on September the 2nd. So that's opened to all cosmetic sectors. And Steph, thank you for promoting that as well, because I think the more people attend, the more we can get these organisations to be able to present to us. I know sometimes information, as Shirley has said, that depending on who you talk to, on what day you talk to them, the information is disseminated slightly differently as well. So to finish off, I know I've gone over time, sorry. To finish off, just to reiterate that, thank you, Steph, and on behalf of ABIC for bringing us all together. And it is working together and putting all our heads together and going forward with a united, I don't know, practice, I suppose, on what we feel each of the sectors should, or what we agree on what each of the sectors should be, how they should provide their services, and what type of wording and what regulations, and highlight just TGA and all of the listings, all of the regulations, health regulations, so that we conform, and we're not breaking any laws, and we're not up there being, on some of the, I don't know, some of the current affairs shows, doing boo-boo things. So that's what we're trying to avoid. Yeah. So we're providing a service to consumers, but also being compliant as well.
Thank you so much, Vera. That was awesome. It's so incredible to know. I know firsthand how much work Sherry Lee and Vera and her team and all the other associations put in. I know it because, I talk to them. But the other thing is I know it because, I'd sort of do the same. Most of the time, you're listening to these leaders speak, but you don't know that they actually volunteer their time. So they have jobs, they have lives, they have careers, they have everything, and they volunteer all of these hours just to help you. And so, like, I hear sometimes, oh, what is it such and such doing, or what's that association doing? And I'm like, are you kidding? They're working so hard for you, volunteering their own time, sacrificing their own time to do this so that we can be safe, so that we can be protected, because we truly love the people in our industry and we're doing it as a passion. This is a passion project. It is not a career making project. So I just wanted to thank you so much to you both. I have the most admiration and respect for what you do, and ABIC really does support the other incredible associations because they're the bedrock of the standards in the industry. That's who you go to get, hey, when I'm in trouble, I call my association. So we love working with you guys, and thank you so much. And
So I've got a question. I've got a question for both Vera and Shirley, if I could. And it's around, and it's almost a little bit of an elephant in a room, and something I'd love your thoughts and opinion on. And after being at the beauty conference, this conversation came up quite a lot. And it's given our services, there's alignment and we collaborate in terms of treatment planning for our patients. What happens when services and as professions we collaborate when we're actually creating treatment plans? And what I mean by that is when we have cosmetic injectors going into dermal space and vice versa. And by default, if one of us goes into one another's space, we've collaborated and we're actually a part of a treatment plan for a patient. So it's a discussion, and it's a bit of a thought in terms of accountability, responsibility, and how we practice in line with the guidelines of TGA.
yeah.
And I'm interested in your thoughts. It's something that's come up a lot, and we've had a lot of derms ask the question, what does this mean for us if we've got an injector coming into our space? Because the minute they came in, as I said, it forms part of their treatment plan.
I think there's a crossover in responsibility, and I don't think that that's actually clearly identified in any of the regulations. Obviously, AHPRA regulations and the Nurses Board regulations or guidelines cover healthcare professionals, and in the Nurses Board situation, it's covering nurses. In the medical board, it covers doctors. In the dental board, it covers dentists. And the dermal therapists have their own governing bodies and their own associations. So
Correct.
in terms of who owns the patient, well, it's a bit of a team effort in terms of it is now, as understood by the guidelines that are coming, it is overarching the medical doctor's responsibility to oversee the treatment plan for a patient. So where you are working out of the same space, my thinking is the medical doctor is responsible for the whole treatment plan, and each other professional that is involved in that treatment plan is answerable to that treatment plan that's been set up and created collaboratively, as we know in practice, between the doctor and the nurse and the doctor and the dermal therapist, or maybe all three of them together, creating a treatment plan that might be carried out by various people within that clinic. But the overarching responsibility, I think, for the first time, AHPRA is absolutely defining that as the prescribing doctor, as the medical director of that establishment.
Yeah, and I agree. And it's all that sort of brings it back to the end of the day and the end user and the consumer and the outcome, safety profile, all of that. But then we take it back a step, and all of what we're dealing with now has actually evolved from an ethical perspective, the ethical considerations or misconsiderations that have led to what we're dealing with now. So, I mean, I don't know what the answer is, but I just thought I'd throw it out to you guys for a discussion, a consideration, food for thought, as a collective across all professions in how we should be thinking and considering when we're creating treatment plans for our patients.
I guess one of the things that depending on what type of practice, working collaboratively is something that we are all moving towards, because we understand that we can't be, a master of all trades. We can't do everything. So working collaboratively with other health professionals within, as Shirley has indicated, within medical practice, then the the arching medical director is the person that is at the head of the planning and the approval, etc. And then we kind of every other health professional will develop their plan, and that there is a discussion on how to, what to, and who does what, I guess. If you are in a situation where you are working solo and you work collaboratively with other health professionals, then I suppose the clear to comply with regulation, it would be clearly that you would refer on to another health professional, and as soon as they go to there, they will take over. But as a team, you talk to each other in regards to, and you understand what the other person is doing.
I have another question for you.
Yeah.
If we have a clinic and it's a derm, and they're marketing, they're advertising for the non-surgical procedures, they're taking all of the bookings, they've got the patient list, and then we have a nurse coming in to actually execute and provide these treatments. This is another grey area in terms of
I can answer that one.
Yeah.
I actually got a little bit further on in the presentation.
In the questions,
Later on, yeah. So we are going to be talking about advertising and communication. If you're a beauty dermal therapist, you want to hear this as well. We are going to talk about it a bit later. But if you are treating a patient and you are in a collaborative setting with medical or health practitioners, if you've got advertising that outwardly puts before and afters on the website, that's questionable, because even if you're
correct.
a beauty treatment, so say a skin needling treatment or very light penetration, even a 0.25, and you're claiming that you're working alongside medical health professionals, your marketing needs to be of that same caliber. And you also, another thing that's a lot of the times we cross-pollinate. So we have a client and they might have had injectables, but they might have also had skin needling. We've taken a before and after photo of this client who happens to have a few things done. How do we accurately determine what has been done on that client? And a client isn't expected to know what the difference is, if that makes sense. So when they're looking at a website that says injectables, and then they go to the next web page and they're seeing the before and after skin needling, in their mind they might be going, oh, that's how I'll look after injectables. So you have to be very, very careful when you're advertising and communicating in a sort of a blended clinic, and I think we'll talk about that a little bit later on as well.
Amazing. Thank you, Steph.
Can I just add something to that? I come from a dermal therapy background. So hi, Vera, as one of Vera's very long past students. But I'm also, I moved into registered nursing space. So I kind of sit with both hats, I guess. And I think the thing that I agree with what a lot of you have said is it's understanding and having an understanding of our professional scope of practice, because we all have really great qualities to bring to the overarching treatment plan. And I think that sometimes, as a registered nurse, we don't have the understanding of skin that, a dermal therapist has. And so I think that, really having a very clear division in our scope of practice and collaborating together is the way forward to have safe and optimal patient outcomes.
Yeah, I love what you just said.
I think on that, where Beverly is also, my interpretation is that, and from what Steph had said, is that we need to have clearer within the guideline what you can put up as photos, before and after photos, but clearly identify what the individual has had, because even from a dermal, just without having any injectables, just in the dermal realm, you might use products, skincare products, and you might use energy, non-ablative, non-invasive, energy based. But which one has developed the outcome of after? So there's multiple things, and my understanding of and reading into the guideline is that consumers are unhappy, and complaints are coming through because clearly before and after photos are showing I can go from this to this, but then what the caption is one service, but then the outcome is achieved by multiple services. So that is the
Yeah.
problem, isn't it? Or that is a bit of the problem.
Yeah,
I agree, Vera. I really believe that, we all as individual practitioners, we all have really good strengths. And you're absolutely right. The consumer doesn't understand that. They look at the whole picture, don't they? They don't necessarily understand which individual professional brings what to the table. And I think that that's where the lines are very blurred, and, with advertising, that it makes it really, really difficult. But I also feel like as professionals as well, we need to really have a better understanding and respect for each other as professionals.
I love
And it's not, I'm just reading the comment in the chats where nurses are latching on to skin dermal. I disagree. I think with that comment, whoever's made that comment, purely because I don't think they're latching on. It's purely a lack of understanding. So they think that in the skin space, we can go ahead and advertise whatever we'd like. But we are, as dermals, we are still bound by the regulations of AHPRA, but as unregistered health professionals and TGA. So those people that are, advertising outside of those guidelines are essentially, if they crack down, you'll still, be pulled out, I suppose. So it's making, at the end of the day, today's session is the beginning of making sure that everybody, or as much of the industry, understand some things that we can say and things we can't say. We're not saying you can't advertise, but we're just saying you need to be realistic. You cannot be using terms, using photos to fish consumers in, and tying people into packages where clearly they may not be suitable, or clearly it may be financially unreasonable.
okay, so I love this conversation, but I think we've gone.
We need to move. Yeah.
No, I mean, we've skipped to guideline 2, which is the advertising, and then we skipped over guideline 1 completely, because I think this is the most contentious one. I'm happy to go right to guideline 2 and start talking about all the advertising stuff, which I think is really, really it's pertinent. But do we want to just answer the questions because we've got a bit of a flow to the meeting. Otherwise,
Yeah. Steph, can I just
Or-
just on that point that was made there, that by one of the participants about nurses latching on to skin, I can understand why the dermal therapists would be feeling like that at this time, because suddenly you've got a massive influx of nurse-led clinics advertising skin that perhaps have never worked in skin before. And I get it. I understand that, you know, that's it's territory based, isn't it? It's this is our area, this is our specialty, and nurses haven't been interested in that before. And I don't disagree with that entirely. I also agree with Vera saying that it's not necessarily the case. And I have a nurse, for example, that works in my practice, and her absolute passion is dermatology. And she's worked in a dermatology clinic for years. There's nothing she doesn't know about skin. And she's also a fabulous injector. And I'm very grateful to have Chloe in the practice, because she's brought a massive element of that too. But I think it just goes back to that scope of practice. I've also had very strong, long-standing relationships with dermal practitioners and dermal therapists, I mean, in my area, who I have referred to for many years and have very strong ties with, and I will continue to do that. So it's both. And I think it's not clear where the division is, Beverly. It's very difficult because there is scope in both of us, both of our specialties, to operate, to be practicing on skin, and to be working with skin, and to be encouraging patients to participate in topical skincare, in treatments, etc. But the nurses that are suddenly jumping on the skin bandwagon will still have to show scope. They will still have to show scope of practice. Just because it's not medical doesn't mean that if something happened to a patient, that they wouldn't have to answer to, okay, where did you learn that? Where did you learn how to prescribe skincare? Where did you learn about skin? Where did you learn about the gut biome relationship with skin? You know, all of that stuff. Where did you learn that stuff? You would have to show scope. I can't show as much scope, although I'm the senior injector in my practice, as my younger nurse, Chloe, can, because she's done a lot more in that, you know, what orals do you take, that kind of space. So I think it still boils down to that. I think that we need to have more of these conversations because we need to understand each other's capabilities. And I think that may be where, Beverly, you're getting a bit frustrated, and I would understand that. And I think that's where these kind of comments come from, where, yeah, from the dermal therapists of, oh, the nurses are jumping all over our territory. And I don't entirely disagree with that, because I think you've got to go out there and collaborate. The people I collaborate with in the dermal therapy space, I understand exactly what they're capable of with energy-based devices. I know what they do. I know how good they are, and I share that with my patients. So we are encouraging our nurses to do that, to build up these collaborations more with doctors on one end and dermal therapists on the other, because we all have a place for the patient, who's the most important person, obviously.
I am going to keep sticking with this. So I'll just skip the guideline one, and we'll go back to it later, because I think that we're well entrenched in this discussion, and it is a very collaborative discussion, because it's about everybody here. So when we're talking about that, for those who sent in questions, because a lot of people that have shown up today have actually sent in so many questions about this particular area. So the AHPRA Advertising Guidelines for high-risk procedures is what we're talking about now. And really at communication and advertising to our patients. And if you're performing the treatment, you're going to fall under this banner if you're performing any high risk procedures. And really, even if you're not, and you think your procedure may not be high risk, that's I suppose a to be determined conversation. So who does it apply to? It applies to practitioners, clinics. If you own a clinic, you're a business, you're an influencer, you're a supplier, anyone who's advertising this. So influencers, because if they're advertising it on behalf of clinics. What are the procedures that we're talking about, and the wonderful leaders are talking about? They're talking about injectables. Yes, we know that. Threads, PRP, things like that. But we're also talking about RF microneedling, we're talking about skin needling, dermabrasion, deep peels. Why are we talking about this? Because these words are now included in the guidelines that for high risk procedures. So all of these words by name are now included, which includes RF devices, ultrasound devices, light-based devices, those types of things, because they're all in that category. And this is where people are hearing and they're saying, why are they talking about this in an AHPRA session? Well, because this captures all the dermal and beauty therapists that do these services, because under the guidelines, what it specifically says is any practitioner, even if they're not health practitioner, any person performing these high-risk procedures falls under this is how you advertise. And this is where we're getting stuck, because dermal therapists, beauty therapists, and in my clinics, and injectors and doctors all work together. This is what happens in my clinic. It's a blended clinic, and it probably so many, and I have thousands of clinics out there have this. A lot of the times we start with a patient and we don't know the before and afters. When we start with a patient, we do skin treatments, collagen induction therapy, light-based therapies, injectables procedures, a whole gamut. And then they end up with an after photo. And then you go to advertise this after photo on your website, saying, look at, this person's had, 5 skin needlings, but they've also had their cheeks done, their lips done, a whole bunch of other things. So you have to really look at what you're treating, how the patient is being treated, and then how you're advertising those and fall within those guidelines. So what is AHPRA saying? Well, they're saying no testimonials. If you're doing high risk, you can't use testimonials. You can't repost, you can't share lots. You should already know all of these. I'm just going through the things that you've asked me. You've asked, can I reshare? No, you can't reshare. You can't like and comment on them either. You can't work with your ambassadors and influencers anymore. No, you can't exchange gifts. So some of the people ask, can you, instead of payment, can I give them a gift or products in exchange? No, you can't do it. You can't glamorize it. So glamorizes is like, flawless skin, painless. And there was a trend of the Barbie trend recently where everyone was putting their fat, injector with the Barbie on there. You can't do that anymore. You can't dance and have fun and trivialize it. And you can't absolutely target kids. No. So teen beauty for high-risk procedures is out. We no longer can do preventative. We can't use this preventative, fix something that, is going to happen in the future. We can't do that. We've got to be really considerate about how we're pitching our words. And Vera said the right thing when she said, how do we use our words? And Nikki said a very important thing is, how do we collaborate with each other? Because this is what's causing the confusion, as well as the interdisciplinary collaboration, which is wonderful, but also opening up a can of worms. Lots of people have asked us, believe it or not, before and after images. They're asking, can we do before and after images? It's clear that AHPRA is saying, yes, you can if it's a genuine patient. It's the same lighting, the angle and makeup. But TGA says something different. And I'll talk about that a little bit down the track. TGA says if it's a therapeutic good, or a medicine, you absolutely cannot use before and after photos. So people are really confused about that. We used to use all these kind of very sexy images for, lip enhancements and idealized sort of looking photos, and AHPRA saying don't do that anymore. So people have asked me, can I, send me some photos? Can I use these photos in my advertising? And they're, big lips and very sensuous, and again, they're saying no. But another question was, can we link to patient photos on their socials? No, you can't. We can't do that. We can't link to the patient socials. Even if we haven't done the photo ourselves, we can't actually do that. And then when you're looking at it, did I just jump around? Let me just have a look. No, I didn't. So risk info. So we've got a link. So if you're actually saying, hey, you do this incredibly high risk procedure, you've actually got to state somewhere what the downtime recovery variability of it is. And if you don't have any space, you've got to link to that full risk profile as well. If you're a practitioner that has a registration number, when you're naming yourself, yes, you do have to use it. I think we all know that. But there's things that people are still doing. That someone asked me, can I say that I specialize in such and such? I'm a skin specialist, or I'm an enhancement specialist. That's what they asked. You can't say specialist. You can't say the word specialist. You can't imply that you specialize. You can't imply that you're better than others. So if you say, I am the queen of, no, we can't say we are the queen of. I've been sent some really cool, imaginative things, but no more. We can't. Bans, they have actually banned apps. So you can't morph things, you can't shape things, you can't, I suppose you really need to, and I'm going to throw to Nikki for some psychological BDD because she's an expert in that. You can't talk about things in a way that will impact people's psychological state. And then they're also saying, no, you can't constantly post because you're normalizing these procedures. So if you're flooding your post with the same type of, hey, do this procedure, hey, do this procedure, it's then normalizing it and posting excessively. And I know it sounds crazy, like, why can't we post? We can, we just need to change up what we're saying, and we need to mix it with education, and we need to really look at ourselves as professionals and as skin health professionals, and then act accordingly. I think that's what the crux of it. So a lot of the questions I've been getting are, trying to get, I know it sounds terrible, but they're trying workarounds. And unfortunately, we need to elevate ourselves, because otherwise our regulations are going to get tighter and tighter if we can't regulate ourselves. Now, the question of before and afters, TGA always wins over AHPRA. So if TGA is saying you cannot advertise S4 injectables and you cannot advertise therapeutic laser outside of what the actual therapeutic claim is, then the AHPRA says yes, careful wording, TGA bans it. The hierarchy is TGA wins 100% every time. If in doubt, follow TGA. So if you are concerned, don't mention prescription products, don't mention brand names, but also don't say the word prescription. So if you say the word TGA, if you say the word, oh, we are a TGA approved clinic, that's also banned, because you're saying that we are TGA approved. So that it denotes that you're actually 100% compliant and that the TGA approves you. And when you refer to we use prescription medications, that's also referring to prescription medications, even if you're not naming them. So in terms of workarounds, it's difficult. So in terms of, we will talk about BDD a little bit later, but in terms of advertising, when you're focusing on those people with regards to BDD, Nikki, can you interject a little bit and tell us, how delicate should we be when we're talking to those particular type of people, or knowing that those
if you know, that's great, but most of the times we don't know till things escalate. So I think, to be mindful and to be most cautious. I mean, all of what's been sort of rolled out by the TGA in particular is so that we're not put in a position where we look that we are enticing, for one. Now, we're not told that we need to complete a BDDE assessment, a validated tool. It's not compulsory. It's not mandated. However, we do have a duty of care to show that we've gone to some effort to show that the patient is showing congruency with the treatments they are seeking, or with the outcomes that they are seeking, and on the day of that they come into clinic. So what I mean by that is we're looking for consistency in their mood, what they're asking for, tone of voice, all of that body language, and we can actually assess it with a few questions. And it could be just, a list of 5 questions that are incorporated within our treatment notes or our progress notes. And it could be, are you looking to have this treatment for yourself? Are you doing it for somebody else? How long have you been thinking about having this treatment? Like, there's quite a few questions that you can incorporate within your assessment process. So we need to show evidence that we have attempted to identify potential red flags and that there is congruency for this person today. Now, part of that, it's not just on its own, that psychological assessment piece where we're asking those questions. the financial consent is something that's really important and big too, that can really throw people as well. So when we're looking at, can I talk to that, Steph? The financial consent piece?
We'll go back because this is number one. This is
Yeah.
practice guidelines. What
So
I
we'll
really
go back to that because that's a really, really important one.
What I wanted to understand was advertising, because there's a question, right?
Yeah.
BDD and psychological impacts. Don't worry about the in-practice stuff because we'll talk about that in a second. I'm talking about if we want to advertise, we need to be understanding that people with BDD are looking at our advertising. And so if we do advertising that makes people feel bad about themselves, you know, that's also part of the BDD process. So you're putting out this, you know, these ads which are showing idealized, you know, beauty and making people feel, you know, maybe self-conscious. How do we avoid that type of advertising? If I'm a clinic and want to advertise.
And it's a good example of that I've seen for IPL and laser, where you see people, you know, with excessive hair. Do you want to look like a gorilla, you know, that kind of a thing. And, you know, there are issues, you know, there are things happening out there that could really trigger people. So I think it's just keeping things clean and professional. And I think that what I've seen happen in industry is inboxing and actually calling clinics and say, hey, I don't think that's okay, like giving a little bit of a nice nudge to one another, because there is still a little bit of confusion out there. Is this okay? Is this not okay? So rather than being whistleblowers, let's be more supportive and integrative and look after one another. So in terms of what we could do better and differently, keep it clean, keep it simple, you know, keep it professional, avoid any imagery at all, I think. And talk about the therapeutic benefits of treatment, therapeutic points.
Thank you. We've got some questions too. I mean, Jacinta's said that all the rules are clearly explained in the Medicine Australia Code of Conduct module. Yes, they are through the UTAS. Yeah, there's so many places you can find these resources. I think Sherry Lee said it before, you need to the responsibility is on you to look this up. We're doing this session today we're trying to answer all of your questions and more than anything, show you that there are avenues if you need clarity, but you need to do your own homework. Then it says here, what about the TGA approved devices and advertising? Yes, we're going to be talking about TGA approved devices and advertising. There is specific wording that you can say from the TGA linked to a device, but then again, you need to make sure you then get that piece of wording, match it up with the AHPRA guidelines to make sure you're converging the two. And I know this sounds like science, but I'll show you some examples now of how to do that. And then it's saying here, does anyone understand lifestyle pics? Is lifestyle going to conference or holidays these days? Yep, I hear what you're saying. Aren't we following the rules? This is Chris. Aren't we following their rules? So if they're wanting us to follow the rules but not saying that we're following their rules, basically they're saying they want you to follow their rules but not refer to the fact that you're following their rules. I'll show you. So this is an example of website copy, right? Just random website copy that I just pulled out from wherever, from online. So I don't know who it is. I've just removed the name of who it is. Non-surgical aesthetic medicine treatments are available at such and such on nurse clinic days. Each session, this is great copy, by the way, each session is guided by a comprehensive consultation to ensure the plan is safe, personalized, and fully aligned with therapeutic goods administration regulations. Sounds like it's compliant, right? Like I haven't said anything, no one said anything much here. Surely it's compliant, except that the possible compliance red flags here are the AHPRA guidelines. The statement saying safe, personalized, and fully aligned with therapeutic goods administration regulations may be seen as making claims of safety and regulatory compliance going beyond what's allowed. So, you know, I'll give you an example of how to reword this without saying these things, but AHPRA requires you to not make assurances. So you can't say, I'm safe, without qualification, basically. So all the procedures carry risks. Even if you're a nurse and you're safe, it doesn't make a difference. You can still have an adverse event. You can't imply that they're 100% going to be without risk. What they're saying is instead say that safety is an important consideration, or the risks and benefits is what they're saying. So the other thing is TGA compliance is consumer-facing advertising may be misleading. So patients aren't expected, what they're saying is to assess the TGA process. So when I spoke to TGA, they're like, well, referring to the fact that you're compliant, well, the client doesn't know if you're compliant, and you're expecting them to assess whether or not you're compliant just by your words, right? So you can't do that. And AHPRA basically expects you to reference, if you're referencing regulation or compliance, it has to be framed really carefully. So you can't apply superiority. We're safe over everybody else. Because if I suppose if it was all even, we wouldn't be saying we're safe. We would all just be acting safely and within the guidelines, right? So basically here it's saying potential breach is implying guaranteed safety and overplaying regulation, and the potential breach in TGA is the reference that suggests endorsement or approval by the TGA. So referencing them, you know, the spa is approved or endorsed by the regulator can make it seem like it is. So think about this as an example. Non-surgical aesthetic medicine treatments are available at such and such on select nurse days. Each session begins with a comprehensive consultation to develop a treatment plan tailored to your individual needs with consideration of the benefits and risk. That's what you can say, because you're not referencing anything. You're not making claims. You're not saying we're risk-free. You're not saying we're completely safe, but you're saying the same thing, if that makes sense. Nikki, Sherry Lee, and Vera, do you all agree with that example to consider?
Absolutely.
Yes, definitely.
Yes, definitely.
Okay, great. So
I think just perhaps so, just for one of the points you raised before, Steph, is about doing your own homework and where do you go. I think just perhaps for the dermal clinicians, it would be advantageous for them to actually go to AHPRA. If you go to to the AHPRA website and you type in advertising guidelines for cosmetic procedures, there's a whole, they've redone the AHPRA website. So if you haven't been to it recently, then pay it a visit. I'm on it all the time, of course, but if you go there and you have a look and you type in that request, they basically go through almost all the questions that we've been dealing with tonight, and they give you the answers. So it's very clear where their stance is at. You don't have to go to the advanced guidelines and then read them all, and try to make sense of it. You can literally just go there like you have absolutely zero idea and you might be a patient, and you can write. So I just pulled it up and it says, can I use social media platforms to advertise higher risk or higher risk non-surgical cosmetic procedures? And you hit expand and it tells you, no, you can't. You can't say this, and you can't say this, and you can't say this, you can't say this. So it's literally really spelt out for us now, and it's really worthwhile going there if you've got a question and just asking the question, and they'll come up with the answer for you.
Yes, sometimes
it's shades of grey, but it's but it is there now. Whereas before you had to go down a rabbit hole of reading 83 pages of guidelines to find the answer. But they're actually making it more, easier in some way.
I feel like what the confusion is, and I think I may ask a question of an attendee here as well, is that there's so much information, it's overwhelming. I even saw a comment, it's just overwhelming to then put it into your website copy or put it into your post. Because when we're reading this, and this is a practical example of someone's website here as well, it looks compliant, because if you look at it, you think, oh, there's nothing untoward about this particular website copy. But when you really delve into it, there's so much that actually goes against what is required these days. So if anybody is game enough to come and share their experience about trying to translate all of this and put it into advertising after this example, please pop up your hand.
Well, sorry, Steph, just with that example though, is it not making one look better than the other to the other side of the fence? So let's say my business, I post correctly and I put up there and I bring up the word risk, but then Joe's clinic down the road doesn't use the word risk. Have I not made them look better than me by following the rules? You know, like, I mean, because a normal person's going to look at that and go, "Ooh, that person's mentioned risk. They must have had troubles," or, you know, blah, blah, blah.
I'm not sure specifically about the word risk, but it's a good what you've mentioned is very timely and apt, because what we're trying to do is not make each other, me look better than another, or me look like I'm specializing in something that somebody else.
No, but I don't think any of us are. I think we like
Yeah,
to use, because a lot of
right.
people, whether they feel good or bad or indifferent about, you know, their concerns. And I mean, I think if someone goes up, "Oh, look, let's get laser hair because you look like a gorilla," well, they definitely should be dealt with if that's their form of marketing. However, you know, the point of it all is to make you feel comfortable and at ease, that you'd actually start the conversation with the clinic. Now, if I put up there and I mentioned risk and I was already on edge, whether it's the way I view myself or what I've heard about the stuff or so on and so forth, like, I mean, let's use Morpheus 8 for argument's sake. Great device, but everyone knows, or the word on the street is that it hurts. It hurts, it hurts, it hurts. Now, if I was to talk about that and then put the word risk in there, you can't tell me my bookings aren't going to be as strong as the person down there that doesn't use the word risk.
You don't have to use the word risk. You
You
can
could put safety.
yeah, you can put with consideration of the benefits.
Well, they used the word safe before, and you told me that it wasn't. I couldn't say that it was safe.
Can't say that. You can say benefits with consideration of the aspects of the procedure. You know, things like that. You kind of have to be a bit more vague than using, "Hey, this procedure is safe." I don't think you can imply that, because
what you're implying is that it carries no risk. So you've got to say, safety is of the utmost importance to us. We will discuss all of the risks and benefits at your consultation. That's compliance.
Oh, no, 100%. Then that's what I'm saying, though. But I mean, if someone doesn't quite use that or goes quite vague, it's then making, like we were saying, one of the points was not to put one on a pedestal and the other one wasn't in the market. But it is going to be doing that inevitably if someone doesn't word it correctly or actually highlight that there is risks.
That's why it's they've given you frameworks. They haven't given you the exact wording. So it's up to us to, I mean, if you like this, for example, because the word risk is in there, you could say with consideration to all the aspects of the treatment. Something like that. So I've just put, you know, an example of what could be something to consider, but then in your wording, I suppose you can be a little bit more creative. But I think that the crux of it is you can't say "we are safe" and you can't imply "we are safe." You can say "with consideration to safety, we will discuss your consultation," things like that. But you can't outright. I know it is difficult to grasp, because I'm still having difficulty myself grasping it. But I understand the underlying message. And I think once you understand the underlying message, you can analyze your copy and see if it's compliant. And people ask all the time, well, one of the questions later on is, are they going to, if they, you know, audit my site, are they going to fine me and get me into trouble straight away? The answer is no. They want you to become compliant, and they understand this. It is difficult in the conversion process to understand everything and then translate that into communication with your patient. So I do think that they want to help.
I mean, I guess so. But I mean, I'd still think there's their responsibility, though, to define scope. Because I mean, I may have worked alongside a cosmetic surgeon forever, but I'm just a stop-go person. It doesn't mean that because I've experienced it firsthand for 5 years, may not have actually done it myself, doesn't mean that it's within my scope. I think there still seems to be a lot of grey areas on what they can and can't say. You know,
well, I think that if you look at the guidelines, Section 9 is absolutely hammering home the point that you've got to have done formalised education now, that working in the vicinity or learning on the job is not actually adequate anymore, and you actually have to show formal education. So if you go to Section 9 and the new advanced guidelines, it talks about that. And I think that crosses over. Chris, I don't know if you're a dermal therapist or a nurse, or a doctor for that matter, but I think it goes across the board. It doesn't stop. It's not just for medicos, it's for everybody, really, that education, formal education and showing that you can do that is important. And the other part of that, in terms of the advertising, is I think the point that they are making, and we've had this conversation with the TGA a couple of times now, is that you need to show that you are offering a balanced service. So it's not just all about the benefits, but hey, there are risks as well, that there are adverse events that have to be discussed, and you will discuss them at a consultation. That is really, as Steph was saying earlier when we started this conversation about advertising, is we've come through an area where advertising actually was out of control. That if you get the lips, the boobs, the whatever, the hip dips filled, the surgery and non-surgical, that your life will change, that you'll look amazing and you'll get the guy and you'll win lotto. And I mean, it really did get out of hand, and we need to draw it back to a medical framework of what we're doing in terms of what the drugs are, but also in terms of the high-risk procedures, where it isn't going to change your life if you're no longer a gorilla. You will just be hairless and life will go on. That's not a great ad. Don't anyone use that ad, but
I really like the way.
But it's just, it had got out of control. So that's what they're trying to do. But are they going to come and fine you? Are they going to shut you down? Are they going to, make you a public, humiliated person? No, absolutely. They have absolutely no intention of doing that whatsoever. They really want to help you comply and to help you understand. So
but it also means that we're not here to try to skirt around the legislation and the guidelines, just because we know that they're going to help us, and we shouldn't have the attitude of, we'll be all right, that they won't, they'll just give me a slap on the wrist, because the problem is the more we don't comply, the more that it will become more stringent if there's clear defiance. So I think there are grey areas, you're right, Chris, but there are also very, very clear cut things that we can implement today if we go through our website and our comms. I'm sure we'll all find some things, because I've just had a look at, I think every website, honestly, every website that I've opened up, and I've opened up about 50 to 100 over the last maybe 2-3 weeks, I have found every single one to have a non-compliance, every single one. So even the ones that are a part of my circle, even my one, that I was like, oh gosh, I'm finding stuff all over the place. So anyway, let's move on, because I think we're going to be short of time. We've only got half an hour. So another example really quick, because this is where everyone was coming stuck. Is here. There's another what to expect in 30-minute consultation. Medical history, lifestyle, goals are reviewed. Digital facial mapping identifies structural changes. Right. Bespoke plans. Our nurses recommend prescription only and regenerative therapies, timing and aftercare, and then treatment and review. Where suitable, the first step can be performed on the day. No, that's you got to think about that. Otherwise, you'll secure the next nurse clinic date. Written aftercare and follow-up visit is included. Okay. And then underneath there was an asterisk. Specific product names and prescription categories are discussed only in clinic in line with TGA. All right, I'm pretty sure you'll all understand exactly now. Digital facial mapping identifies structural changes. This will be seen as, are we overstating diagnostic capabilities, or is it just standard imaging? Because if you've just got a normal MORME device, that's just standard imaging. And, are we claiming that it's scientific superiority? A bespoke plan with recommended prescription only or regenerative therapies can mention a plan, but it will be tailored, but referring to prescription only treatments in advertising material, that's a no-no. You can't promote that you're doing S4 medications, and you can't really say, hey, we're doing prescription stuff, because everyone will know it's dermal fillers. You can't refer to dermal fillers and anti-wrinkles. You can refer to the consultation of, a holistic consultation about their what they want to focus on, or their skin concerns, or you can, like the service you can talk about, not the actual treatment. So where suitable, the first step can be performed on the day. This could imply that immediate access to the prescription-only medication would happen, which I think AHPRA cautions against. Like, we need to do a consultation, clearly separate from the treatment. And I know that that's also a contentious issue, but that's one thing that could be flagged as well. So it says written aftercare and follow-up visit are always included. The word always suggests a guarantee. We can't say always. We can't say guaranteed. We can't say those types of words. So let's skip to what you can say then. How do you make it compliant? Remove prescription only. remove that word. Keep the emphasis on the consultation, as I said, the assessment, the tailored discussion, without implying the inevitability of it, that you're going to book in on the day, and really look at how you're talking about your facial mapping and diagnostic tools. This one seems to be compliant, and for the experts, you know, please correct me if I'm wrong. What to expect in a 30-minute consultation? Your medical history, lifestyle, and goals are reviewed. Imaging may be used to assist in assessing your skin and facial features, so not being specific about it, but saying imaging. Personalized plan, our nurse will discuss a range of treatment options, outlining timing, provide aftercare tailored advice for you, and then, if suitable, your treatment plan can begin on the next available clinic date. Aftercare instructions and follow-up are included.
Can I add to that, Steph?
Is that
Financial planning is really important, and not just for the day, the treatment that's requested on the day, but for the entire 12-month treatment plan. It needs to be realistic, and there needs to be consent.
do we have to put that in the advertising though? I don't think so. Just on the day. So, you know what? IPL, same thing. If you're saying you're treating sun damage and pigmentation, you're, you know, when it's a TGA registered device, you could be saying, you could be getting yourself into trouble if it's not the exact wording of the TGA and if it doesn't align with AHPRA. So I will make all of these, because we're running out of time, available, and give you the alternate wording as well. So you can go through your website and have a look to see whether or not you're feeling like you're comfortable in that compliance as well. So I'm going to skip forward. There's FAQs. I'm going to answer them briefly, and then we're going to head over to the practice stuff, because I think that's important. Which procedures are affected? I've been asked that so many times. You have to do your homework. These are the things that are affected by the advertising. High risk procedures, they're named: dermabrasion, peels, injectables, ultrasound, lasers. How can you advertise them? You can't. That was a question. You can't. No testimonials. Will we be warned before we're fined? Usually yes. Can we use info cards in the clinic? Yes, you can, if they're factual, plain, and you don't glamorize. So people are asking, can we give material out? When you're actually in front of the client, it's different. You can, if, again, it's not glamorizing. So people are asking about disclaimers. Where are they needed? You have to have disclaimers pretty much on everything if you're showing results in the clinic. They're needed wherever you post, whatever promotional material you have needs to have your disclaimers on it. Now, I've seen educational videos. I don't know if you have, Sherry Lee, but I've seen some influencers out there, or some, you know, well-renowned nurses doing educational videos that are very factual. No dancing, no music and stuff like that, but they're talking about the specific treatment. Is that allowed?
No, it isn't. We pushed this point quite strongly last week at the webinar to actually get some clarity. You cannot, in line with TGA guidelines, discuss any S4 products or just you cannot, even for education purposes. If it's public facing, you cannot provide any education, and unless you have a limited page that you have to have membership to in terms of education, and only HCPs that you've cited their actual registration to are allowed to be on it, as in, you know, a pharmaceutical company. So Allergan Aesthetics or Galderma, they may have an education page that is purely accessible to HCPs, then that could be education.
So what were they referring to in terms of educational video, like education being allowed, or educational videos? What are they referring to there?
You can talk about the aging process, but you cannot intimate in any way, shape or form how you're going to address that. So you can't talk about, well, we have volume loss here, so volumization would address this, because you're intimate. There's no other way to volumize your face other than to use a filler or a biostimulator. Therefore, by default, you're intimating that that's what you would do. You can't talk about muscularity in terms of anatomy and then say, so the solution is that we use a wrinkle relaxer, because that's banned. You can't say that, we can treat these muscles, because you're intimating how you're going to treat those muscles, and that would be an S4. So anything that would lead a member of the public to know what that potentially could be, and it involves a medication, you cannot say. So education, public facing, is actually almost impossible.
What about education of the risks?
Nothing. No, as long as you're talking about the medication, it's banned. So it doesn't matter whether you could say, you could talk about a horror story of blindness, but you'd still be referring to an HA. It may not bring you any customers. That's irrelevant. The fact of the matter is that you can't refer to a medication in any way, shape, or form, positively or negatively. You can't do it.
Have you seen the talking about? They don't refer to they're just giving general education. Have you seen the people in our industry that are a bit prominent doing that?
Yes, I have. And I have also inboxed them and said, hey, don't do it, because it's not actually acceptable, and it's not actually okay. And this is gray areas. A comment was made, a question was asked around this in at the NSS, and the AHPRA representative there said, the TGA representative there said, it would be deemed satisfactory if it was for education purposes. However, it can't transgress any of the guidelines. So the extrapolation of that is you can't refer to a medication in any way, shape, or form. But of course, that was the full stop for some people. And immediately the next day, a few prominent people came out and educated. This is an educational video. I'm going to tell you the difference between, this and that. I'm going to tell you the difference between, different types of botulinum toxin A, or I'm going to tell you the difference between biostimulators and HAs. And it's like, no, you're not allowed to mention the medications, so don't do it. But it's the ... that people sometimes, it serves the purpose of, oh, they said this. But it's like, yeah, but they're talking about all the other bits that are, as you said, you can't just take one bit. You've got to take one bit, another bit, and compare them and make sure they align, and then you'll know if you're compliant. And just on that quickly, I'm begging everybody to be as compliant as they possibly can see fit. There is way too much. The AHPRA guidelines came out in December 2023. It is August 2025. There is still way too much very obvious non-compliance on websites. The intricate stuff about whether I said risk, or whether I referred to the TGA, or whether I wasn't quite balanced in my wording that we've been discussing, that is nothing compared to some of the stuff I'm still seeing. Big lips and lifestyle, and buy the lips today, $3.99 was one I came across this morning. I mean,
we clearly know that's not compliant.
Correct. So I'm begging every single person working in this space to just get as compliant as you can be. And then the nitty-gritty stuff is not as big a deal. The wording and stuff we can work on together, of course, but it's very difficult to go and sit with the TGA or with AHPRA, and Vera, I'm sure you would feel the same, and Nikki, and say we're a bunch of professional people. We operate professionally, and we deserve to be heard on our opinion on the TGA guidelines around advertising and about patient education. And then they bring up 5 websites in a row with people dancing half naked and patients doing whatever, and it's mortifying, because I'm like, oh, okay, well, I'll just go back to where I came from and forget about what we're going to say, because we want to have a voice, but they're not going to listen if we blatantly are not adhering to the guidelines.
Agreed. All right, so let's keep moving. Do these affect practice or advertising? Both. Is clinical and marketing. So we haven't had a chance to go through the clinical stuff yet, or the practice stuff. Can I list needling, threads, and lasers on the menu? Needling, lasers, yes, but they're subject to all the rules of advertising, and they're high risk, so you can't actually advertise them. So, I mean, on your menu that you've got, you could probably list it, but yes, it does apply to needling as well. It applies to dermabrasion. Somebody just asked, does it apply to microdermabrasion? It applies to dermabrasion is the word they use in there. So you really need to go back and have a look at your website to see whether or not you are compliant, because it includes quite a few treatments. Can I run a home clinic? That is, if you're running a home clinic, it's very difficult. Your facility needs to meet the laws and make sure that your aftercare, your storage laws are met. Most, I'd say 99% of clinics, home clinics, will not comply. So if you're doing it from home, you need to go and do your research, because you might be very well practicing outside of laws. Do I need hospital experience? People are saying, you know, because the 12 months to get into one of the prerequisites was you need 12 months experience. Well, you don't need it in hospital specifically. You can have it in general specialist practice. The GPs are all right. But you can't have it in, you know, cosmetic practice for a year. It has to be general practice. It has to be, you know, actual medicine. Well, do doctors still need to be on site all the time? No, they can still consult, you know, via various methods. You know, FaceTime can be one of them. They don't have to be on site all the time, but they need to consult every time. So, you know, we are looking at a change in the way that a lot of people are doing things. Scripting and storage, you can't do batch scripts, so no bulk scripts anymore. That's out. That was out a long time ago. Each patient needs a consult, they need a script, they need to store it under your state law, and your state law is different to Melbourne, is different to Queensland, and this is why Queensland are having problems, because we haven't had a chance to address the state problems, but each state has their own legislation. So AHPRA, you know, has their guidelines, and then each state is responsible for how they, you know, what the rules are surrounding the practice of. So it's your state. Don't worry about AHPRA. Worry about your laws, and then worry about AHPRA. You know, you have to blend AHPRA TGA and your local state laws together to get it right. It's not just one over the other. I think there's a lot of confusion there. How do nurse-led clinics survive? This was I mean, these are some heartbreaking questions that we've gotten. We need to do the right thing first. We need to advertise right. We need to communicate right. We need to work within the scope of practice. You need to find a team around you to, you know, doctors around you and teams around you to support you. Or having a conversation with Sherry Lee, and she said something so, like, it just made everything just so much clearer to me today. And she said, we're not designed to be working alone in a clinic. And that is so true. You know, we're not designed to be a solo nurse just working alongside, because it's not just the medication that we're prescribing. It's everything else that can happen, right, Sherry Lee? It's a combination of things. Do you want to just talk about that a little bit?
Well, the thing is that, you know, we are healthcare professionals, and when we see patients, they are generally well, but they can also have strokes, heart attacks, syncope. They can, you know, they can have anxiety attacks. They can have all sorts of medical things that occur because of their raised anxiety or raised blood pressure around having our procedures, completely unrelated to what we're doing. I mean, we talk about vascular occlusion and blindness as our biggest risk factors, but, you know, people are having all sorts of other health episodes, and they often will have them in spaces. So the guidelines of last year, or late 23, which are the current guidelines, talk about not working independently on your own, that you have somebody in the clinic with you at all times. And I know that's not actually being put into practice because of the way that nurses have been working independently on their own, and it isn't actually considered safe when you look at a medical model. And I'm sorry, I don't want to be the person who's kind of, you know, turning the knife or making people feel uncomfortable, but we are nurses, and we are starting from a basis of a scope of practice that we understand to be true. And we work in collaboration from the day you start nursing. You work in collaboration with your medical colleagues and your other allied health professionals. And so that is actually the medical model that we need to stand back from. And we need to look at what we're doing and going, okay, am I actually practicing in a team? Am I practicing in a way that is the safest for my patient? We're not performing beauty, and I'm not diminishing what our beauty therapists and our dermal practitioners are doing, our dermal therapists are doing at all. So please don't, misconstrue that statement. But we all need to work in a collaborative team in the same way that if I'm going to treat a patient, I need to have collaboration with a dermal therapist to be able to provide that aspect of care to my patient satisfactorily, or someone that is specializing in that area and working in that area. So it's the same. We need to get back to that model, and we've gone a little bit off track, and things have changed with the growth. And as Steph and I, we were talking today, it was like, yeah, well, we got the demand, and the demand will still be there. So one of our biggest risks to our industry is if we don't comply, and we will get more healthcare practitioners coming to the space. We will get more product coming in from overseas. We will have more black markets. If we don't try to balance the two, providing service but also in a compliant way, then yes, we'll lose our businesses to the black market, because patients will still demand these treatments, and that's very difficult. But I think we're starting to get some headway in AHPRA listening to us, and the TGA listening to us on this point, because it is increasing. We're seeing more of it. So it's a good position for us as nurses and dermal practitioners, because we can show that we can be compliant and we can be professional, and we need to stop the black market from growing.
Yeah, I love that. Thank you. I'm going to throw to Nikki in a second, because we need to talk about the practice guidelines, because the practice guidelines are for, and then I'm going to jump back to a little bit of training and advertising right at the end. So the whole practice guidelines really, if you look at the consultation process, you can really be compliant with a lot of the things in the practice guidelines just by the way that you frame your consultation. And Nikki is she works a lot on the consultation process and BDD. Can you take us through the a little bit of the requirements in your consultation process that hit the key factors within those practice guidelines?
Yeah, I think we're all doing what we're doing and we're being compliant, but it's stepping it up and taking it a little bit to the next level. So it's moving on from the tick and flick, having your questions and just, yes, no, sign the dotted line and we're good to go. That's not enough. So we need to be a little bit more comprehensive and a little bit deep. We need to be patient-centric, and we need to be thinking about the patient's emotional, psychosocial, all of those domains when we're actually in that consultation. So we need to be, and the end game and the end point is to be thinking about patient safety, patients' expectations, and patients, treatment outcomes, presentations, and we're looking for congruency throughout the whole process. And when we talk about congruency, it's, again, when we're doing a consultation and assessment for a patient that comes in, if everything seems to flow well and they appear to be an appropriate candidate for treatment today, we can't assume that the assessment that we've done today is going to be applicable for next week, next month, or next year, because people do have changes happening, okay? We know that psychological piece can change. That internal dialogue that we're never privy to is going to change. So we need to be in a position to be reviewing that every time the patient comes in. So from, we've got a verbal, we've got a discussion, where and I think it's thinking about asking questions like, how's work? What work are you in? That will help you understand, are they in a financially okay position to proceed with today's treatment or with a possible 12-month treatment plan that we're going to be offering them? It's talking about what their family dynamics are like, what their mood is like. Are there situational, psychological factors that we need to be thinking about? Are they situational? Historically, is it long-term? Is it something that's, going to be continued? Are they being treated medically for it or not? All of these things are really, really important and can determine what the outcome of your treatment is going to be and what the treatment plan looks like. So one of the really important things that's stood out for me when chatting with other clinicians is the financial consent piece. Verbally attaining consent to proceed and talking about what that treatment's going to cost on the day is not enough. So you need to actually have a consent form for that. And in that consent form, it needs to actually state what the medication is that is going to be used, what dose is going to be used, what area is going to be applied to. Then it needs to talk about the unit price, the total price, and it needs to be signed off by the patient and the clinician. Okay. An extension of that is the treatment plan. So I don't know how all of you work, but we have a very comprehensive, progress note, which will talk about two really important things towards the end once we've collated the medical history. And one is, what is the patient's 12-month treatment plan? You need to validate your why you're actually doing today's treatment, and how is today's treatment going to have continued and long-term benefit for this patient. Because if today's treatment's going to cost $3,000 and $5,000 and the patient hasn't been consulted to know that over the course of 12 months they need another $3,000 to $4,000 treatments, then it can be seen as misleading and also I'm thinking of the words misleading to the patient. They may think that today's treatment and that price is going to be enough to resolve and manage the concerns that they have. So yeah, the 12-month treatment plan and the financial cost of whatever those treatments are within the 12 months is really, really important. And then the final piece is today's treatment is, and you list what today's treatment is and what that cost will be. So that's something that's really, really important. And I think from what I'm hearing is not done as well as perhaps what it could be. Now, with regards to the BDD assessment, we don't have to use validated assessment tools. You can, we've got one that we supply, the CANSAT tool, but you don't have to. But you still need to show evidence that you've done some pre-screening to show that the treatments that the patient is seeking today are treatment, that they're congruent with their mood, and that they're doing these treatments for themselves. We want to understand the underlying motivation for why they want to have the treatments. So it could be, as I sort of mentioned earlier, it could be just key questions. It could be 3, 5, 10 questions, asking things like, how long have you been thinking about having this treatment? Asking, are you doing this treatment for yourself? Asking, are you prepared to have an additional 6 treatments to, and be on a treatment plan to support the treatment that you're having today? So you want to get some and some understanding for what and the why of that patient, and that's really important. Now, and I'm happy to share some of those questions. So once asking these questions, you'll be able to pick up a red flag, possibly. And if you do pick a red flag, that's when we would recommend to use a validated assessment tool so that you have a baseline to validate, whether you should proceed or not, or validate why you have proceeded to have this treatment, which is really important. You've got the verbal consent needs to be in plain language, and I think we're stepping away as part of that education role, which is really lovely to see, of just standing before the patient and just giving them all the information, this and this and this and this, and sort of like throwing things at them. And then the patient's doing this. And when they're doing this, it's very hard to actually, measure if they're really understanding what's being said. So some helpful tips that, we share is, if you want to be in an education space with your patient, ask them, what brings you here today? Tell me what your understanding is about the treatment that you're going to have today. Do you understand of any of the possible risks? Get as much information from them as possible and then fill in the gaps. That's going to lead to a more authentic and a more, I think, wholesome, informed consent outcome for your patients and for yourself too. You want to know that, that things are understood before you proceed.
I love that. I think that the consultation piece, there's so much, Nikki, and there's so much, guys, to
It goes forever. It's a whole day's worth of discussion.
Can't go through it all. There's just so
You
much.
can't. But there's like
the gap. What you've said is ask the patient what they understand, and then go in and fill the gaps as well, because then you'll find out exactly. They'll understand it a little bit better. I'll make all of this available, I think, to everyone. I'll email all of this, and I think maybe we do a follow-up consultation only session would be great. Don't you think?
I want to share another helpful hint, which is it blows my mind every time, and that's moving us away from the tick and flick and sign the dotted line. Is when we ask a patient, "Are you seeing the doctor for anything?" They go, "No." Next question. So thinking about asking the question multiple times: "Are you seeing the doctor for anything?" "No." "When was the last time you saw the doctor?"
Right.
"Do you have any scheduled appointments?" So you ask the same question multiple ways. And one of our biggest problem and deficits and risks that we have in our space is patient congruency, because they don't align and they don't think about these treatments as medical. And as much and as often as we talk about it, the reality still is there. There's still that cosmetic overlay and perspective. So, we've got to raise that standard. Where are we flicking to?
Well, I think we don't have enough time to keep going with that, because I just want to end on a few things, and like training, really, I want to add, because I've had a really good question about training and competence, and I think Sherry Lee touched on this, but it was a great question, actually. It was from Marla McAlpin, who used to work with ABIC, actually, and it's a really great question. It's, can we clarify basically how cosmetic nurses, how are they, where, and even dermal therapists or beauty therapists, the question is for them as well. How are they getting their training or performing these high-risk procedures that maybe aren't in their scope? So, like, let's just say a nurse or a beauty therapist starts, obviously not a dermal clinician, Vera, I'm going to throw to you for this one as well. Dermal clinicians and dermal therapists learn these treatments in their package, right, in their scope. But if you're not learning these, usually where you get this information and this training is from suppliers, right? So your supplier will come along, do a 2-hour training on this laser, and all of a sudden in 1 or 2 hours, you're off treating, this particular laser or this particular ultrasound device. And then that's what they get. That's all they get. But that's not enough, because now AHPRA is saying, well, no, we actually need to show that you have this in your scope and you're properly trained. So what they're saying is must only perform cosmetic procedures when they have appropriate education, training, and competence. As Sherry Lee said before, ability to manage the complications, have an understanding of anatomy and physiology, assessment skills. So, all the risk factors and theoretical knowledge is not enough for a 2-hour supplier job, right?
No.
So we actually need to talk about this, because a lot of people in the industry are relying on their manufacturers to make them experts, and then off they go saying that we now can do this. So if you're a nurse or a beauty therapist out there that hasn't had formalized training and you're doing high-risk procedures, supplier training alone may not be enough. I'm not saying it's not enough. I'm saying it may not be enough. You may need to get proper CPD. They haven't really outlined exactly what that looks like, but there are courses out there that aren't considered short courses, and they're not considered device provided demonstrations. They're structured, they're competency based,
industry endorsed.
That can be endorsed even by, I don't know, CNA, if you endorse certain training, or Vera, I don't know if ASDC endorses certain training. We as ABIC try to, support what we review as peer reviewed training. What are your thoughts on this particular? Vera, I'll throw to you now, and then Nikki has as well, so maybe we can all talk about it a bit.
So my other hat is working for a device company in the clinical onboarding area. Okay, so from a device company's point of view, clinical onboarding only suffices what insurance company require for them to insure you the understanding of how to operate the machine. Yeah, so it's very, very clear. We need to show you what each buttons to do to press. We need to show you where the safety button is and troubleshooting, etc., etc. So we have clear checklist on onboarding, and they basically tick that we have covered each of the area of the device that you have purchased under the configuration. So we are insurance company compliant around the globe. So that's what I have to stress. Is it enough? So if I take my paid job hat off and put my educator's hat on and representing the ASDC, it's not. By no means, it is not. It is so that you can operate the machine. So, and training, so depending on the level of background knowledge an individual has, if you have clinical specialists who come in that are very good at adapting information so that it's understandable by the individual, fantastic. If you have clinical onboarding staff that is purely these are the checklists that I have to tick, then you just get that checklist information. So there are lots of areas that we don't, basically as a company, you don't have to go through, like consultation, and my biggest part is knowing how to consult. If you know how to consult, if you've gone and if you've professionally developed yourself, completed courses that cover these things, then you're at a better place. So but postgraduate studies, there are some good ones, there are some not so good ones. So finding good ones is sometimes can be quite hard and quite costly to be able to do it all. And then we probably don't have robust regulation on what is the compliance of a further educational development course. So you've got the formalized people, so like your universities, TAFEs, and registered providers, and then you have private registered providers and private providers. So there are lots of providers that deliver quite good education, but it's their education, so they're not accredited or approved by anybody. So then you kind of go, well, who who regulates, is the content of validity and up to date, etc., etc.
I agree. I mean, we've got we've got RTOs and we've got formal education, we've got higher education, and then we have CPD, and then a lot of the further education, but a lot of I've found the really good quality ones that really care about the course content and delivering, extremely high level of that advanced education are members of bodies, whether they're members of, CNA or ASDC or ABIC, and then, industry endorsed courses, like even APAN, I would say endorses some types of courses, but they're a body that's there. They have, professionals working in that body that review course content. They say, look, this actually meets the needs, that's specified by, AHPRA and specified, by the industry what they need. And you can generally, that you can sort of trust them, but there's no framework right now for CPD, which is what we should be like all of us together, the associations and the industry backing, we should be hopefully going for some kind of standard there for CPD that we can all contribute to and agree on. So I think that's really important. Sherry Lee, do you endorse?
Not so much endorsing in terms of we don't actually have a CPD house or we don't have that in play. We haven't had the capabilities yet, being quite young in terms of our existence, and very caught up in submissions and governance for the last 5 years. But it is a long-term goal in terms of establishing that. We have sort of formed a collaborative alliance, if you like, or a collaboration at least, with NSS Academy and with ACAM, who both hold houses of CPD where you can register your CPD, and they both endorse courses that are available to nurses as well. So that is definitely something that we will, a direction in which we will steer our nurses, because it is formalized, endorsed education. But the first higher level education available to nurses to nurses and doctors alike, to all potential practitioners in this space in terms of the healthcare professionals, is beginning at Monash University in October of this year. So if you haven't looked into the Monash education that is going to be available yet, as a healthcare professional, if you're a nurse, you should be, or a doctor, you should be doing that. And the first module, which begins on the 1st of October, is regulation, ethics, and patient management. So,
well, we've also got, I mean, if you're looking for, industry endorsed courses, there are so many good ones. I mean, I know I'm biased in saying, but I know how much time and effort Nikki puts into her to CPD, and we've also got other education partners that we endorse as well, and we go through I mean, even with AACDS, I mean, that's more formal, but we go through and look at a lot of their courses. So there are some really good ones out there. Nikki, maybe you want to put yours in the chat as well, and anybody else who's got any ideas on CPD can put theirs in the chat as well.
I mean, we definitely have a list of education that we feel is adequate education, but endorsement in terms of this is what we see as as the best. We haven't got the processes in place for that yet, but yeah, we definitely have a list for our members on our website of education opportunities that we feel are of value.
The question comes up a lot, and they're like, where do I go? What do I do? I don't understand what you mean by, structured education. And so, there's so many different pathways, and it is a little bit confusing. But we're right on 30.
I did ask AHPRA to clarify this the other night. We asked the question in the webinar directly, and I have also asked it before in terms of this education. And actually, they're not going to define it. It's also come up in the chat tonight, which is why I'm raising it. It's one of the questions in the chat this evening is, why won't they define it? They don't understand it. When I spoke to Professor Casey last week, she suggested that we would end up defining our own specialty, and we would end up defining our own education. And so that is the direction in which the CNA will work towards, being able to set a standard of practice and then matching that with formal education available to us to set a standard for education. And so they're not going to spend the time. We've got to go to them and go, we're a specialty, we want recognition, and we want this education level to be what it is. So that, I think, is, we all have a voice in that. All of the members of the industry have a voice in that, because it won't just be nurses. It will be doctors, dentists, dermal therapists. It'll be, and by that we will then define the industry. I might be dead and buried by then, but that will be the plan.
Me too.
That is the long-term plan.
Before we wrap up, everything discussed tonight, I will email everybody that's participated, that including the discussion on training. The other thing is, we didn't get to talk about nurse prescribing. It does apparently start sometime in September. They don't know exactly when. If you're confused about that, cosmetic nursing is not excluded, but it is not included. It is that what they're saying is that there's lots of loopholes to go by. I think we need to have another little session on this, and it's state law dependent. After AHPRA and the NMBA come along and say this is what nurse prescribing, RN prescribing looks like, then it really is up to the state laws to determine whether or not that's even possible. So people who are saying to me, oh, we can prescribe as of September. No, you can't. It's state law dependent, and all state laws don't allow for that right now. We'd have to have mass legislation changes. I mean, there are some states where that are set up a little bit better for it, like Victoria. But again, it has to go through a process. It hasn't come out yet. The advanced copy is out. When they know more, they don't even know much at the moment, but when they know more, they will let us know. And we are constantly asking about it as well. So we will probably talk about that at another time. But I just wanted to thank Sherry Lee, Vera, and Nikki so much for today. And thank you all, the attendees, for sending in all your questions. I hope we got to most of them. And if you do have any, please, we're all available to help you. And we are, as you can see, all very united in our stance. So thank you so much, everyone.
Thanks,
Thank you, Steph.
and for organising this. Is amazing.
Oh, you guys are amazing too. Thank you so much, everyone. Have
Thank
a
you.
good night.
Have a great night.
Okay, bye.
You too. Bye.